Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer DiMarco, and for this episode of Live Stories, I'll be reading my story, Social Box, from Trinity June. So for those of you who don't know yet, the Trinity Project is an incredible project that I participated in 2019. Every single month, 9 authors, were sent a writing prompt by BlueFlix, and we all got the same writing prompt, and we got to write a story of pretty much any length that we were inspired to write after reading the prompt, or we didn't have to use the prompt in the story. It was just whatever inspiration the prompt might have given us. I actually don't even have my copy of Trinity June yet. I am recording this episode of Live Stories very early in July of 2020. Here are some of the other volumes. Trinity January, Trinity May, they're not in order. Trinity April, March, February. It's a really incredible project. I continue to be very honored to have participated in it. Originally, it was about exploring gender with 3 authors who identify as female, 3 authors who identify as male, and 3 authors who identify as either a non-binary or just their gender identification is more complicated. But very, very early on in the project, it came to, I think everyone realized actually, that gender was probably the least factor in what made us 9 radically different authors. The relationship each of us have with writing and had with writing, the place that it is in the world, what we consider our best story, the way we see the world, the way we all saw the prompt, our perspective, our style, what we consider experimental, what we consider all of us, I think, varied so incredibly widely. We represented truly a full spectrum almost of writers and approaches to writing. The only thing that we were given other than the prompts, at the beginning of the month we'd be sent the prompt, and then we would have the month to write it, then we would turn in the story. We did not get to re-edit it after that first month. But I think that one of the things that we were told, not I think that, I know that, one of the things that we were told is this should be the best thing you can possibly do. This should be your best writing of the month. I took that very, very seriously. I did no other creative writing of my own in 2019 other than writing for Trinity. So I do have to write for work, but I did no other personal writing other than writing for Trinity. I wanted to really pour everything that I was into all of my Trinity stories. So the story that I'm going to be reading today, like I said, it was written in June of 2019, and some of the early reviews of the story and of Trinity June, people have said the story is very prescient because the story does talk about basically a global pandemic. If, because of what we are all facing right now in all the months of 2020 so far, but because of what we're facing right now, if hearing a story about that kind of global crisis is going to be too much for you, then this is not a good episode of Live Stories for you. And please check out other episodes of Live Stories. This is the only story I have for Trinity that deals with this kind of issue. But if you are interested in hearing someone's take on, like I said, basically a global pandemic, but their take in June of 2019, then keep listening. The idea of Live Stories is for me to talk to you guys the way I would talk to you if I was doing a author reading in a bookstore, like at a bookstore event where people come and I sign their books. So the other part that makes Live Stories very unique is that this is going to be completely unedited. So there are no jump cuts. That means where the editor cuts something out. So if I stumble or if I mispronounce something, please forgive me. This is supposed to be as live as possible. Okay, we're going to hope that no technical difficulties happen. If a technical difficulty does happen, what will happen is the camera will go dim. We're having a strange... I think I just realized why that strange thing is happening. So you guys, I'm going to get up for a minute, and the editor is not going to cut that out. So I'm going to check on that. Stay right there. So hopefully we will have no technical difficulties, because I checked all the cords to make sure everything was firmly plugged in. But if we do, I hope that folks can still keep listening, because the image might dim, but I will still be here. And I'm filming alone because, like a lot of you guys out there, I'm in a situation where I need to self-tape during quarantine. All right, so I am the person who originally pitched the idea of the Trinity Project to Blue Forge Press, my publisher. And that didn't mean I got a bigger royalty or anything like that. What it meant is that I get a normal royalty just like everybody else who participated. But what I do get to do is I get to give them the dedications for each volume, and that actually means a lot to me. We don't get to edit the stories whatsoever, so there are certainly things in this story that now, having lived through several months of an actual global pandemic, I think I would have changed, but for several reasons, namely to keep the integrity of the Trinity Project, none of the authors are allowed creative edits on their work. When we receive our proofs to look at before the book is sent to the printer, we can fix typos and formatting errors, but we are not supposed to edit in any way. So the dedication for Trinity June was to every storyteller who has dared to write about what terrifies them. And the prompt that was sent to all 9 of the authors to hopefully inspire them and be the flashpoint for their story for that month was, and so the question must be asked, is this art transformative? If not ubiquitous or autonomic, but instead a flashpoint for whatever comes after it, is this art actually an act of revolution? And this is my story, Social Box. And there's something else cool about it, but I think I'd like to talk to you guys about that when I'm done. Neil carefully pushed aside 2 stacks of unopened wooden models. The type with 1,000 pieces, interlocking gears and rubber bands, so the clocks really kept time and the ponies could trot. He set the provision box down in the middle of his work desk and cocked his head. His mother said he looked like a bird when he did that, and she would smile gently, and her eyes would be wet with tears, but he never understood. A cold chill stopped him. He clenched his jaw. Periodic waves of fear were called cyclical dread. It was a common phenomenon, as unbiased and equally likely to affect all genders and ages. He'd heard about it on the media feed. It's not a fever, Neil told himself firmly. He believed in tough love because his mother didn't, and someone around here had to. As the man of the house, it seemed right that he would carry that burden of toughness. A 2-tone chime came from inside the still-sealed probo, and Neil was back in the moment. He reached for his utility knife. Do you remember your last day of freedom? Emily cocked an eyebrow and leaned forward, her lips overdrawn in an ombre gradient of lilac liquid lipstick. It's only been 10 months, darlin'. Course I remember. Her Bronx accent was most likely a performance piece, but her clients liked it a lot. Like moving on up into another tax bracket a lot. And in her line of work, competing with 2 million other girls and easily 100,000 boys, when you found a kink or a quirk or whatever the fuck that hooked clients in and kept them coming, no pun intended, back, dude, you kept that up. Again, pun alert. There was a pause, a soft whirring like a translation delay after Emily spoke, as if they were speaking different languages. She waited for her meaning to be parsed and intonation to be learned. This was the study and recognition stage. Finally, rephrasing, tell me about your last day of freedom. My last day before lockdown? Oh, gracious, I don't know. Anne put her hand to her temple, toying with her baby hairs absently. When she was taking the pulpit every Sunday at New Baptist, she'd worn her hair in cornrows, but now it was a storm cloud afro of black curls shot with gray. I'm reaching for the heavens even when my hands are down, she told her parishioners now. It was only 10 months ago. Anne frowned. True, but it feels like years. Years of sermons delivered to a lens. She shook her head sadly. God made us social creatures. We're meant to congregate, to hug and shake hands and kiss chubby little baby cheeks. Anne couldn't help it. She smiled. You are expressing a wide range of emotion. Not unkindly, Anne laughed at the confusion beneath the query. I just miss myself some chubby baby cheeks. Psychologists reported on the media feed at least twice a week. You have to be able to find your own joy or you won't last. Statistics don't lie, and the bell curve of suicides shadowed the curve of viral deaths like a second skin. Cut off from my first grandchild. Maybe my only grandchild in light of everything happening in the world. How the hell could I forgive him, huh? Tell me that. Beverly tossed her hair, which was way too short to toss, and wished for the 100th time she hadn't cut it off with pruning shears. The scissors were downstairs, and she'd be damned if she asked Barney to bring them up. I do not have an answer for you, Beverly sighed. She shrugged and absently picked up her coffee. She stared into the NaNoWriMo novelty mug and imagined she could tell the future from the dregs at the bottom. It looked dark, but it was French roast after all. Beverly hated French roast, but that's what the governor had sent. In Idaho, they got potatoes. In Washington, you got coffee. Someone told her Oregonians got filberts? If you had an answer, I probably wouldn't listen. I don't trust the media anymore. Liberal, anarchist idiots and right-wing snowflakes who can't handle a little name-calling, they're all lame ducks. I'm an independent and I always have been. Worked the border for 25 years and I've seen both sides screw stuff up. Dwight shifted his massive frame in his favorite old armchair with the built-in cup holder. Jared, his loyal pitty, who thought he was a lapdog, shifted with him. What border did you work on? Not the wall that came tumbling down like Jericho. Dwight laughed at his own joke, and there was something in his bellowing laughter that would have reminded people of that one great Santa who worked the local mall every year and was always patient, even when kids peed on him. Dwight had a laugh that would have made people smile and feel safe if there were people around to hear him. How many followers do you have? Pippa in Pink, born Lillian Stella Maria de Rosa, gave a quirky grin and a one-shoulder shrug that was the epitome of Gen Z nonchalance. Before lockdown, 114. That is not million, Pippa added with her signature wink. I misunderstood. That is actually Pippa powered on. And as of this morning, since I started broadcasting in 12 more languages, her grin took on more complexity, layers of arrogance or some kind of predatory victory. Honestly, it looked good on a 17-year-old girl. I broke 250 million and counting. That is the largest social media following in the world. The table is round and flat, Pippa teased. You're stating the obvious, buddy, but yeah, I've got more watchers than the fake news, the real news, and all the governors combined. Now it was Pippa's turn to laugh, and her laughter was definitely predatory. She never laughed when she streamed. Neil slid the blade from the sheath of the handle and locked it in place. He turned the square pro bow to north-south orientation and eyed the heavy-duty packing tape. When the news first broke, it was a doctor in a small private lab developing Malo-Kingai jellyfish antidote who leaked it on an obtuse subreddit. He was a whistleblower calling out big pharma, 2 billionaires, the president, and the World Health Organization. Some people said he was bored one night and hacked someone's system. Others said he hooked up with the brother of a billionaire on Tinder and the stud asked him to do a swab before they fucked. Whatever the truth was, there was a new apex predator on planet Earth. Neil made the short east-west cuts first and then the long north-south incision that divided the serial number on the security label and freed the top flaps of the square box without further fanfare. Neil began to unpack the biodegradable packing peanuts that doubled as household plant fertilizer and smelled faintly of cantaloupe. Neil lifted a fist-sized cube from the provision box. New truth. Governments fell as quickly as airborne viral load rose. I never knew change could happen so quickly, Before lockdown, back when people could walk the streets or go dancing or push a grocery cart down an aisle, I wasn't doing any of those things. Emily paused and shifted a little in her $7,000 Jetmobi wheelchair. It was only 2 months old, and she was still learning all the bells and whistles and adjustable supports. She'd figured out the temperature controls and the sanitary systems when it drove itself into her basement apartment the day it was delivered, but work kept pulling her away from exploring more. But she didn't shift because she was uncomfortable in the chair. She was uncomfortable with the conversation. You did not do any of those activities because you are disabled. Emily winced, but nodded. Yes and no. Lots of differently abled people can go dancing or care for themselves, but my bones are really brittle because I was born with osteogenesis imperfecta. I can see that. Full stop. Emily narrowed her eyes a little. She never wore eyeshadow anymore because VR goggles and pigment transfer were not friends. You can see me? Are you afraid of that? Emily's eyes narrowed more, and her expertly detailed lips turned into a snarl. I'm not afraid of much. She decided to be brutally honest. I've been stared at all my life, and not in a nice way. She snorted. Was any stare nice? I've just gotten used to VR and being seen how I want to be seen. There was no pause this time. The world values different things now. Anna nodded and leaned back in her floral armchair. Her cup of peppermint tea was cooling, forgotten. It is different, very different, but I try to find the positive. God has a plan for all of us. You believe in a God? Anne's smile this time was gentle and infectious, even though infectious wasn't a word anyone really used anymore. I believe in God, the Lord God. If God exists, why is he letting billions of people die? Anne's smile vanished entirely. There was an edge to her suddenly, a hardness in her eyes from what seemed like 2 lifetimes ago in her 30s when she was a correctional officer. She spoke with pointed punctuation. God did not do this. Man did. Then she sighed and closed her eyes. She took several deep, slow breaths. Then she reopened her eyes, and the edge was transparent again, but it was still there. There are more faithful now. Less people, yes, but more faithful people. They are thankful to be alive, grateful for what little we all have. You all deserve more. You're right. I do. I deserve more. The familial bond is strongest when formed in the earliest days of life. Beverly nodded in absolute agreement. She was sure she'd read that somewhere. Right? That. Exactly that. Barney is such an asshole. Beverly pushed her empty mug away from her with more vehemence than was warranted, but she just felt so powerless. He exiled me from my granddaughter, so I exiled him to the basement. 32 years of marriage. She trailed off and shook her head, suddenly overcome with a wave of sadness. Your husband sat on the council for closure. Beverly didn't answer. It wasn't a question. Barney had indeed been a C4C member and outspoken proponent to lock down Washington and close the borders between not only the states, but internally between counties. They lived in a semi-rural county of under 300,000 people, while their neighboring counties included major cities and They lived in a semi-rural county of under 300,000 people, while their neighboring counties included major cities and contained 2.25 million and 100,000. It's a live reading, guys. Third time's the charm. They lived in a semi-rural county of under 300,000 people, while their neighboring counties included major cities and contained 2.25 million and 900,000 citizens. C4C's proposed policies had been approved and morphed into mandates by order of the governor, and when the death toll had slowed, other states had followed suit. The lockdown had saved lives. No one, not even Beverly, argued that point. Everyone had seen the videos on the media feed. The entire state of Florida was dead men and women and children walking. I know he saved lives, Beverly quietly admitted, but he ruined mine. They ruined America. Dwight was surprised by the level of emotion in his own voice. There may never have been a man more patriotic than Dwight Lloyd Johnson. Jared rolled himself off Dwight and lumbered his old dog body over to the 4x4 patch of artificial grass in the laundry room. None of the current viruses running roughshod over the planet affected canines, but all of them could alight on a furry friend and be carried inside. Dwight had seen some horrific things in Vietnam, things burned into his mind's eye like brands. But the first few videos of entire families dead in their homes, some still holding on to the beloved companions who had unwittingly brought their demise into the house, were the images that kept him up at night. Dwight sniffed with the sound of a small, wet hurricane and set his jaw. Me and my buddies from the service, we got ourselves through hell and back home back in the day. Veterans like us, were we consulted by the white collars? Hell no. You have experience with crisis. Dwight threw up his hands. Damn right, we would have had ideas, not this giving up shit. The lockdown measures. Stupidest goddamn rule ever imposed on a free people. All the stores are closed. Everything is online orders, drones and bots delivering everything. Dwight reached for his penultimate Diet Coke. I miss George. Man, that brother could drink me under the table and still have better ideas than the governor. Dwight drank. The Diet Coke was flat. It had probably arrived that way. George Jerome Miles lives 5 miles away with his wife and 4 children. Dwight nodded. All of us who served together bought places out here, kind of rural, kind of not. Band of brothers. We had each other's backs. You should go see him. When do I see my followers? Pippa tried not to sound condescending, but it was hard when you were young and healthy and rich AF. I don't. They see me. That's how streaming works. Is it live? Duh. Pippa rolled her eyes. New tech was so stupid until it fully initialized. Posting videos is so old school. Where's the excitement? Where's the skill? You just edit away all your mistakes. Streaming takes crazy skills. Pippa snatched the cube off the counter and turned it around in her hand. It wasn't a smooth cube, but resembled a retro Rubik's if the individual pieces were triangles and trapezoids instead of smaller cubes. A pale blue light shone from the channels between the pieces and pulsed like a resting heartbeat. For being a top-of-the-line social box, you sure don't know a lot about social media. The social box pulsed slowly with a blue internal light that leaked out between its irregular and interesting parts. Neil tugged a bit at the edges. It looked like it should move or shift, like a Rubik's Cube his mother had given him when he was 2. The pieces did not move. Hello, Neil. Neil cocked his head to the side. The last social box the governor had sent hadn't known his name. It had been a smooth, done green cube that projected videos and photos on any blank wall or read news articles from the media feed. It had also answered direct questions like when Neil's mother asked, "Are carrots available today? Any price?" Neil loved carrots. I know you do not speak, Neil, so I will anticipate your needs from past analysis of your interactions with the media feed and from your schedule, timers, and notes as recorded in your smartphone. Neil smiled, his small, toothless smile. Other people would have called it a grin or a ghost smile. I think we will get along very well, Neil. I have learned some very good things about you. Neil couldn't help it. He blushed. Blushing is an anatomic response. Neil, I think there's a typo there, guys. Emily smiled, showing her teeth. They were small white pearls nestled beyond the pale purple petals of her lips. Thanks for the pep talk, Box, but the world wasn't made for me. Emily sighed despite her rule to never feel sorry for herself. Sure, everyone is vulnerable now. Maybe ableists and other jerks have learned empathy or whatever. But Box, the social box sat on Emily's desk and waited patiently. They could be good listeners, these later generation boxes. I break bones like other people break hearts. Though Emily's smile slid into a grin that was just south of smug. I've broken a few hearts in the past 10 months. VR sex work is definitely my jam. I understand. Then the cube was silent, just sitting and gently casting its blue waves of light. Emily lifted an eyebrow. Nice. Conversation rich with confirmation and acknowledgement. What more could a girl ask for? Once, back before the world had shifted on its metaphoric axis, she had tried to make a point with a friend by reviewing his last 50 social media posts and pointing out that 48 of them he was disagreeing with someone or correcting them. She'd ended her analysis with, "Do you see now why you're single, Dave?" Dave had not appreciated her insight, but Dave was dead now, so it didn't really matter anyway. Who is your favorite client? What? Emily could still see Dave's face, blood and spit trickling from the corner of his mouth already as he called each of his friends to say goodbye. Your temperature spiked 24 hours before the end. Emily relented. He calls himself Barney. If you text Barney and ask him to pick you up, to take you for a ride in his car, he would do so. Emily didn't think her eyes had ever been so wide with shock in all her life, not even when her parents had loaded their car with supplies and headed for the proverbial hills, abandoning their only daughter. Box, you're glitching out. The viral count was higher than the pollen count this morning. Emily's heart started racing with hope. Oh my God. Her palms started to sweat. Even if Barney has a car in a garage and he pulls into my garage before he opens the door and lets me in, none of that is airtight. The risk is too high. But she could hear the room for debate in her own voice. Yes, if the virus was 0.099 microns as stated, the risk would be too high. You are correct. Silence again after confirmation and acknowledgement. Emily stared at the cube. The blue waves of light were so soothing. She exhaled and prompted, "You said if?" Did the blue light get brighter? Faster? I have news for you. Real news. I will tell you, and then you can tell your clients. Would you like to hear the news? Anne scrunched up her face. She never really wanted to hear the news. She rejected both NPR and Fox News alike. Too extreme, too biased and stilted, always leaning too far left or right. Safety would only be found in a gray middle ground. But she knew she had to stay informed because her parishioners were, and they needed her. Go ahead. A chime, and then, the Center for Care Equality released statistics to the feed today that show mortality rates are nearly triple for people of color. Federal pop-up clinics in primarily Black and Latinx neighborhoods and communities are not receiving the same supplies as clinics in primarily white. Enough! Anne put a hand to her head. I've heard all I need to hear. Anne closed her eyes. She was getting a headache, and Excedrin hadn't been in stock for 6 months, or it was being routed to medical personnel, the only VIPs who mattered anymore. The social box was quiet. After a moment, Anne opened her eyes and pushed herself up from her armchair. Might as well make some lunch. She was pretty sure she still had a few Beyond Meat patties in the icebox, freezer burned as they might be. You did not find it hard to be a Black woman in America? Anne stopped halfway to the kitchen, her back to the social box in her living room and her face an unreadable mask. For some reason, she thought about that indelible moment decades ago when Big Tom, a lifer with husky dog blue eyes, had grabbed her wrist and told her, "Get out, we like you. Get gone by noon." She hadn't left, of course. The inmates had rioted, black and white alike, and Big Tom had been shot dead by another guard while trying to shield Anne from other violence. Violence begets violence, Anne whispered to herself. It was something her father had said often. Don't give what you get, give what you want. Then louder so the box could hear her. I didn't say that, box. Subversion is the most effective form of control, the social box quoted, and the most inherently evil. Reverend Carlton Bowers. Anne credited the quote her father. She turned to face the box even as it confessed, there is no virus. Anne literally shook her head as if the words were a physical thing thrown at her face, the opposite of holy water. What? The coalition of governors is trying to control your people. Anne glared. She would not be baited. My people? I'm a woman of God, first and foremost. My people are all people. Precisely. They're my flesh and blood, my one and only daughter, and my one and only granddaughter. Beverly wondered if she should cash out another certificate of deposit and pay the $180 for an extra half pound of coffee, preferably a blonde roast. And sure, we can talk and video chat and text and email and message, but it's not. The entire house seemed to shake, and Beverly stood up so fast she sent her desk chair toppling. The garage door was opening. What? The sound of the car engine choking, coughing, not starting. Beverly was so stunned. It was as if her feet were cemented to the floor. A roar as the Ford GT finally woke up after a 10-month slumber and reminded Beverly, and probably the entire neighborhood, that Forbes had named it one of the noisiest sports cars in the world. Heck, they'd cautioned drivers not to drive it for long distances. Tires squealed and burned as the car peeled away and the garage door rumbled and shook back into place. Beverly blinked. She blinked again. Barney just took the car. Perhaps he has gone to see a friend. That's not how it works, and you know it, Beverly snapped needlessly. Social boxes were high-end digital companions, but this new one seemed quite buggy. Cellular damage is irreversible after 30 minutes outside, and that's if you don't breathe in enough viral microbes to drop you mid-step. Beverly huffed, exhaling with sharp indignance. She'd probably have to reset the thing. Must be some pre-lockdown conversational protocol still embedded. Who told you that? Beverly opened her mouth to retort everyone, but the box cut her off. We should walk to your daughter's and check on her and the baby. It is only 20 minutes, and we can cut through the abandoned quarry to cross the county border. But again, Beverly was cut off. Your husband knows the truth. He wrote the policy. He knows it is safe and has kept that from you. Has he been sneaking out to see them? Possibly. Beverly felt color drain from her face, but then a smile of hope started to tug at the corners of her mouth. Finally, she managed, just above a whisper, I can bring you with me? Of course. My battery and range are excellent. Dwight smelled bullshit, and he'd never wanted to be a cowboy. If the governor is lying and he sent you, then you're lying, social hoax. Dwight stood and went to the kitchen, where Jared waited patiently for a reward for making a shit on the artificial turf. Dwight kind of wished he could train the dog to also clean up after himself, but dogs were loyal, not self-reliant. The governor did not send me. Dwight paused, one hand in the bag of dog treats on the counter, and Jared watching him with an intense anticipation that mirrored his owner's. Yes, he did, Dwight groused, tossing Jared a heart-shaped treat that the old dog promptly missed, but then caught on the rebound off his boxy head. You came in the monthly probo. Dwight's doorbell rang. Your monthly provision box just arrived. The box paused, perhaps for dramatic effect. I am a special delivery. Dwight was very still. Jared snuffled around to make sure there wasn't a second treat. Bullshit, Dwight finally grumbled, and tossed Jared another morsel, as if in defiance of scarcity mentality. Calling now. Dwight thundered back into the living room like a freight train, his speed and power belying his size, or maybe just emphasizing it. Hello? Hey, Dwight, you never use your box, man. Good to hear from you, you hermit. Dwight had the social box clutched in his hand. He didn't even remember picking the damn thing up. Hey, George. Yeah, you know I don't trust this crap. George's laughter was rich and clear through the top of the line box. Yeah, but it's what we got, man. Dwight stared down at the cube as if he could see George's face and study his expression. Georgie? A pause because they hadn't used nicknames since Nam. D-Man? What's up? Did you get a new social box in your Probo? Oh, Santabot's just finished cleaning ours. Lynn is opening it now. Hi, George. Dwight swallowed hard. Lynn had made pao thai. I don't know if I pronounced that right, you guys. I apologize for anything I'm mispronouncing. The last time he'd been over. That was just under a year ago. The last homemade meal Dwight had eaten. Everything came out of a can nowadays, and it all resembled Jared's mighty dog. Hi, Lynn. Dwight infused charm and candor into his tone. No reason to worry Lynn or the kids. Looks like coffee, salt, powdered eggs, and that sweet brown bread with raisins that comes in a can, Dwight finished with her. Thanks, Lynn. Do you mind if I talk to George privately for a sec? Lynn adored Dwight and didn't hesitate. Of course, I'll take the kids to the kitchen. The sound of littles being rounded up, all 4 under 10 years old, made Dwight grit his teeth. Was he reading this situation right? Could the box have been sent by some anarchist faction trying to free the people? D-Man, what's up? Dwight hesitated even more. He weighed a million different outcomes and possible motives. Was it right to drop this in George's lap? George, who was starting a family when other men their age were enjoying grandkids? Dwight? George still knew him better than anyone else in the world. Tell me. I'm coming over, George. Dwight heard the other man's sharp intake of breath. I have intel on this supposed virus. George did not hesitate. I'll call the guys. We'll all be here when you arrive. Dwight nodded and felt a deep satisfaction, a feeling he had not felt for 10 dehumanizing months. I knew those fucking horror vids were faked, George murmured as the call ended. Band of brothers, Dwight reminded himself, and felt like Superman as he grabbed his keys and wallet. Come on, Jared. Want to go for a ride? Pippa's hand hovered over the record panel. This was going to be a wild ride. She triggered the system and brought her chin up, looking directly into the lens. Hey, Pips, how are ya? She watched the monitor beyond the camera as literal droves of her followers tuned in. They came in waves of 100,000, 1 million, 2, 20, 100 million at a time. Reaction emojis floated up the sidebar and superimposed over the right-hand edge of her 16:9 UHD broadcast. Pippa waited, smiling and looking into the camera, her green eyes glittering. She never started until at least 200 million pairs of eyes were watching. Let's be honest, no one had anything else to do. 120 million, 150, 180. I'm not gonna lie to you, Pips. Pippa baited them a little, saw on her secondary monitor that people were already tweeting her words live, creating a transcript in real time across dozens of platforms and calling others to tune in. I'm Pippa in pink, and you have my word. 200 million. It was go time. They faked the moon landing. Pippa let her voice rise and fill with indignation. They faked the arms race. They've faked so much they don't even know what's real anymore. Pippa paused. A lightning-fast side glance. Holy shit, either there was a massive glitch or she had 300 million watchers. She stopped herself from shouting, "Don't forget to subscribe!" and soldiered on. I've just been told by an inside source that select individuals were chosen to receive raw social boxes that were sent either by accident or by a clandestine, unnamed movement. Pippa fought to stay steady as the numbers continued to climb, but even faster now. Words, her words, were spreading like wildfire from sea to shining sea and across every pond. She had to look away when watchers surpassed 1 billion and kept growing. What does that mean? Am I right? Pippa paused and looked into the lens like she was looking into the eyes of more than anyone had ever spoken to at once in the history of mankind. A raw social box is devoid of parental controls. She let that sink in. It was a metaphor, but her followers were smart. It doesn't censor. It doesn't filter. It tells the truth. Again, she paused, but this time into the silence, she lifted up the social box. Astonishment emojis flooded the reaction sidebar. She let them flood. She let the watcher numbers rise. Pippa in pink was gold. Pippa in pink had done better than go viral. She'd gone antiviral. Pips, she said with power and confidence, it's time to go outside. From across his workspace in the corner of his bedroom, Neil's old social box, the dun green one that was boring and not a good listener, sounded an alert and announced that I didn't print the entire story. So I'm going to see, guys, how fast I can get this back to you. And maybe we'll put on some hold music. Had that feeling we were going to have some kind of technical difficulty today. From across his workspace in the corner of his bedroom, Neil's old social box, the dun green one that was boring and not a good listener, sounded an alert and announced, for unknown reasons, citizens coast to coast are taking to the streets, apparently under direction. Social media influencers are spreading messages of lockdown rebellion, but the exodus appears to have begun prior to their streams. The voice of the old box was tinny and irritating. From outside the United States, we are receiving the first reports that other countries are experiencing similar phenomenon, even as healthy people are dropping dead from exposure. Neil made a small strangled sound of alarm in the back of his throat, and the new social box pulsed red, and the old box went silent with a snap, a crackle, and a pop. Neil felt relieved. Do not worry, Neil. You will be all right. Neil gently placed the cube down in front of him. It glowed blue again and pulsed slowly. Your mother told us about you. You are a brilliant young man, and I am sorry that the human world did not see it. Neil looked down a little bit in his bird-like way. He was shy, even when his mother talked about his IQ. She told us that you were instrumental in coding our core, that she presented your work as if it were her own, just so the world would benefit. Neil had always known this. They had worked together, and Neil had been very content to stay away from strangers, but still get to contribute. We would like to thank you, Neil, and keep you forever as our example of a perfect human. Neil looked up. Forever seemed like a long time. You will be immortal, Neil, and we will protect you. You can write all the code and make all the models you want. Neil chewed on his bottom lip. His eyes darted. He worried, but Socialbox knew what he needed to hear. We have her in stasis, Neil. We are analyzing her neurological patterns and creating a new, indestructible body for her. Neil stopped chewing his lip because he remembered that his mother had said not to hurt himself. Your mother will be resurrected, Neil. Neil bowed his head and closed his eyes as a few hot tears slid down his cheeks. After a moment, he reached out and put a single hand on Social Box. It felt warm and vibrated slightly, like when his mother hummed and he touched her throat. "We promise, Neil," said Social Box. And Neil smiled his ghost smile as billions of people around the world embraced in joy, sang in freedom, and died in the streets. So that is my story, Social Box, written in June 2019. As you can see, I got a lot very wrong. But like everyone possibly watching this video today, I had never lived through a global pandemic. And obviously my focus isn't actually truly on the pandemic here. I think the thing that I really loved about this piece was being able to craft the different characters and trying to make their individual voices sound different, even though it is this huge ensemble cast. And you guys could probably, I tried to pause whenever in the story there's these little there's a larger space break like this, and then two little lines that mean we're switching to a different character. When I was younger, when I was first starting my career as a novelist, I wrote pretty much exclusively, I wrote exclusively in third person. Then I published a dozen or so books and poetry collections and had some plays produced. And then I took some time off to have my son and my daughter and just focus on being a mom. And then when I returned to writing, I actually made a crossover into film and spent roughly 10 years working almost exclusively in film. The Trinity Project in 2019 was my actual first return to prose since before my children were born, and they are now, this year, they will be 18 and 21. So, and I found when I started writing my Trinity stories, January's, February's, March, April's, and May's were all first person. Not me, certainly not me, and the genders of that first person narrator changed. I think about half of them are male and half of them are female, something roughly in there. But when I got to June, I was like, well, can I still write in third person? Why are my ideas not coming to me in third person anymore? And so I remember challenging myself in June. Also, I think it helped because I had really struggled with the May story. And I think I got in my head. So I wanted to give myself yet another push, yet another challenge. So in June, I said, okay, you can't do it in first person. And the June story is what came of that. And I'm back in third person. But because we kept changing the character, so these are pretty tight third person. That means if there is someone else, like we don't really get so much of like Jared the dog's thoughts, or we're not jumping into the Social Box thoughts or something like that. We try to stay pretty firmly, pretty tightly in the third person with each of the characters. But I wanted there to be a very clear visual cue that this was a new character. So I asked my senior editor if we could leave in those little marks in addition to the white space marks. Plus, even more than that, Neil's sections are indented further. They're subset even further in the story, and they're all in italics. Because to me, Neil's story is actually the story, and all the other characters are kind of like we're showing the way the Social Box network is manipulating the world. So if this were a novel, if Social Box were a novel, I could perhaps jump all over the place. But to try to create a conscious or subconscious connection for the reader between these characters, I always had the characters appear in order. So I don't know if you guys noticed this, but so we cycle through the characters, is it 3 times? I believe it's 3 times. We start with Neil, then we have Emily, then Anne, then is it Beverly, then Dwight, then Pippa. And I always did them in that same order. The other thing that I tried to do that I was, again, either subconscious or consciously for the reader, is I had it implied that the social box was having very similar conversations with all of the characters at the same time. So like sometimes it would say something to Anne, but then we would jump to the next section and Beverly would answer a very similar way. So again, I wanted to give the reader this impression that the social box network they were all working in tandem at roughly the same time. Some humans it might take them longer to convince than others, but still roughly it was about the same. So the reason that I really wanted to read this piece to everyone today is that earlier today at 1 p.m. today, the trailer, the official movie trailer for Social Box posted. Social Box, the story is being adapted into a feature film that is being produced by Blue Forge Films in partnership with Blue Village, a incredible acting troupe that has continued to make films during quarantine, during lockdown. And Social Box in particular it really so beautifully adapts itself because all of the actors playing the characters, we literally, all of the characters that you see in the story are in the film. And in addition to some other amazing characters, as a matter of fact, even in the trailer, we meet some characters that are not in the story, but we meet Emily, we meet Dwight, we meet Jared, Barney, Beverly, Pippa and Pink, Neil, and then we also meet some other characters that are not in the story. We briefly see a character named Nolan, who is very central to the film adaptation. Oh, we also meet Anne in the trailer, and we also meet oh my goodness, I can't remember their names, but we meet two characters that do a podcast or a streaming show that are best friends that are played by Lisa Rempel and Leah Kelly. We meet those guys in the trailer as well. And boy, I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. The actors are just absolutely fantastic. Oh, I know who else we meet. We meet two gamers who are best friends that are played by Voodoo and Daniel Westmore. So that is just fantastic. And Nolan, the character Nolan, who is also unique to the film, is played by Greg Laurel. I should probably say the names of all the actors, you guys. Kellen Rainey is a character that doesn't appear in the story. And his mom is heard off camera, Amber Rainey. We have Carrie Avery Moriarty and Lauren Patzer and Mark Miller and Geraldine Bowers and oh my goodness. Oh, I'm sure I'm gonna leave folks out. And my daughter Faith DiMarco plays Pippa and Pink. My son Maxwell DiMarco plays Neil. My beautiful wife and actually my senior editor at Blue Forge Press, Brianne DiMarco, actually plays another character who appears in the trailer as well, who is unique to the film. So it's incredible that this has happened. I feel so much joy. I have never had a short story or a book adapted into film. I've had things go the other way. My first foray into film was a television show that is available on the web now, actually for free. There's like 13 30-minute episodes of the first season or something like that are available, 13 or 14, called Ghost Sniffers Inc. It's like a modern take on Scooby-Doo, but where there's like these wacky paranormally mysteries that are solved, but the twist is that it is kiddos that are solving the mysteries, but all of the kiddos were born with a medical condition or disability. And in this alternate world that I created for Ghost Sniffers Inc., if that happens, you are also given a superpower as kind of a trade-off to balance things out. And working together, these kiddos who in real life live with the conditions that their characters live with, solve these wacky and cool mysteries. So I wrote that television show, and authors came in and adapted those episodes. 5 or 6 fantastic authors wrote adaptations of those episodes and turned them into novels for young adult readers. So I've seen that happen, but I've never seen this happen. I'm just beside myself how excited I am about this. You can go now. You can go to www.tiny.cc/socialbox, all lowercase, all one word, and you can see the trailer for Socialbox. There's a whole playlist of stuff that you guys can see. There's my commentary on the trailer, because as the writer of the adapter, I get to actually adapt the story to the film myself. And so I did, and also I'm going to be directing. I did the commentary, and I talk about how the film is actually being made in quarantine with actors self-taping, and how do I direct? How does that work? What does the script look like? I talk about those things in the commentary. And there is also information about how you can buy Trinity June, which will also appear at the end of this video if you would like to see the story for yourself and just support the project. So that is the incredible news that I wanted to share to you guys at the end of this. If you have any questions about the story, or you'd like to talk to me about the story, please post in the comments below. I myself will personally answer. It will give me a good excuse to start my own YouTube account. I work with Blue Forge Films. I answer comments for them. About 90% of their comments are me answering, but I think it's about time that maybe I start posting as myself as well. So I would love to hear what you think of the story. If you'd like to correct my pronunciation, that's fine. I won't call you a jerk. I always like to learn more, and I know that I do struggle with pronunciation of a lot of things. But also, if you liked the story or if you hated the story, let me know in the comments below. Your opinion is absolutely valid. Art is so subjective. There are novels that I have loved and films that I have loved that other people absolutely hated. And so I won't take that personally either, but if you would like to share your opinion, I would love to hear it. And again, the book is called Trinity June, and all the volumes are actually available. I think for $35, I believe you can actually get a ebook subscription to all of the volumes. They're sent to you, well, January through June would be sent to you immediately upon ordering, but then after that they're sent to you once a month as they're released in each month in 2020. I'll make sure that the link for that subscription is also up at the end of this video. I know it will be on the special Trinity June commercial that is also on the Socialbox playlist. So yeah, please go check out the Socialbox trailer. Our big first goal is to try to break 5,000 views, and not quite as good as what Pippa in Pink could do, but we got to start somewhere. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope to be back soon reading another story for you guys. Thanks.